Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to continue our college football predictions with I think this is week 11. So yeah, we only got like 3 more weeks left until the regular college football season ends. Last week, my record was I went 20 and 10 of 30 games that I predicted, which puts a total season record of 162 and 71. And I'll say this week games, these are some of the best slate of games we're going to have. Because when I was going through my pick for game of the week, it came down to 3 games. You're gonna see who I ended up choosing at the end of the video. But before we get into our predictions, just so I will not be doing predictions for Virginia at Louisville, Michigan State at Ohio State, and Arizona State and UCLA. Only because we all know how these games are gonna wind up. So we're going to start off with Virginia Tech and Boston College. Boston College had a big win against Syracuse, which that school's been reeling after since a 4-0 start. And Virginia Tech, yeah, they got shellacked by Louisville. But with this being a home game, this one could go any way. I'm actually surprised Boston College is bowl eligible at this point. But here you go. I think they're going to win this game. They're at home, and they're just a very safe pick for me to choose. Next, we have Vanderbilt traveling to South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. The Gamecocks are in an interesting situation. They have to win out if they want to have any shot at going to a bowl game. But looking at their schedule, yeah, they might not. They pretty much gonna have a very rough time. But I think them beating Vanderbilt will be a good step in the right direction for it because Vanderbilt, they're already out and they're easily the worst team in the SEC every single year. And that takes us right into Georgia Tech and Clemson. Both of these schools had pretty good wins last week. Georgia Tech beating Virginia on the road and Clemson upsetting our 15th ranked Notre Dame. Now, if you asked me this question about 2 weeks ago, I would have chose Georgia Tech to upset Clemson at home. But since Clemson is in Death Valley, and they got one more home game next week, and then they're at South Carolina. I'm gonna roll with the Tigers to win to get to their 6th win, and they'll be bowl eligible. Georgia Tech, they're probably gonna have to wait another week for that to happen. Then we have Alabama taking on Kentucky. Alabama had a huge win over LSU, and Kentucky had a huge road win over Mississippi State. Bama is favored by like 11.5 points. I'm definitely taking the Tide to win. I do think they'll cover. But hopefully, will do this win will help out with their playoff standings. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Then we have Texas Tech taking on Kansas, which Kansas got a road win over Iowa State. They did not fall for the trap game. And Texas Tech had a win over, I believe, TCU last week. Anyway, I'm taking Kansas to win. Follow that up, we have Maryland taking on Nebraska. And another 2 schools I feel like are heading in the wrong direction. Because Maryland started off 5-0. I believe they started off 5-0 or 5-1 or something like that. But they have been on a losing streak. Last week they took a L at home against Penn State. And Nebraska, they took a L against Michigan State of all schools. This one, I really don't know. But since I'm actually going to go with Maryland to win on the road to get to that 6th win to put them bowl eligible. Because remember, Nebraska, they're a bit of a rebuilding school. It happens. Then we have Indiana taking on Illinois. And I don't know much about either one of these schools other than I will say Indiana did get a huge win over Wisconsin. So that should count for something. And Illinois, I think they had a huge road win over, I believe, Purdue. But I'm going to roll Illinois to win. I do think they're the better team this week. Follow that up, you have NC State taking on Wake Forest. Now, I do need to briefly explain some things, some developments involving this game, because State's starting quarterback for the last two games has now officially shut it down as he redshirted the rest of the season, which means Brandon Armstrong will be starting pretty much the rest of the season, and it's been clear as day. I think Morris was the better quarterback for NC State. Yes, they got a huge home win over Miami, but it was mostly riding on their defense and Morris not messing up much. Wake Forest last week, they had Duke on the ropes, but they let him off the hook on Thursday night. Now, if you asked me this question 2 weeks ago, I would have said Wake Forest was going to win because State, they did not look like a good team. But now they're figuring out their defense is very, very good. I'm going to roll with State to win. Following that, we have Arizona Wildcats, the red hot Arizona Wildcats, traveling to Colorado to take on the Buffaloes. And honestly, I think this game could go in any direction. But I am going to lean towards the hotter team, literally, and that's Arizona. Because they've just been getting it done week after week. Then we have Baylor taking on Kansas State. And if only Kansas State had a kicker, they would have upset Texas, and pretty much the Big 12 would have been out of playoff talk, would have been out of the playoff conversation for the whole season. But I think this week is a get-right game for them. I don't think Baylor is all that great, so I'm going to roll with Kansas State to win. Then we have a rivalry. Florida State's final ACC game of the season, and they could possibly wrap up a perfect season if they take down the Miami Hurricanes, who is coming off a road loss over NC State. Given that Miami is woefully inconsistent this year, and I like Florida State's stability, I am going to take the Noles to go perfect in the ACC, and they already clinched their spot in the championship game, so we'll talk about them when that time comes around. This leads us to another ranked battle between the Tennessee Vols taking on the Missouri Tigers. Missouri, I'm gonna give them credit. They hung in there with Georgia. Unfortunately, Georgia was the better team. In Tennessee, they had a win over. Oh, they beat somebody. I can't. Oh, they had beat UConn, so no wonder I couldn't remember who they beat. I think this game, this one should be a fun one to watch. I am going to lean towards Missouri to get the win here, but if Tennessee wins, I will not be surprised. Then we have what was going to be one of my picks for game of the week, and that being the Utah Utes taking on the Washington Huskies. Washington coming off a huge road win over USC, a game that I honestly thought Washington was going to drop, but then I realized USC, they never had a defense. This might be one of the best units Washington's going to face this whole season against Utah, because they're coming off a huge win over Arizona State. I don't know. I actually can see Utah winning this game, but luckily for Washington, this game is at home, so I am going to lean towards the home team to win, and hopefully Michael Penix can strengthen his Heisman hype a little bit more. Then we have Pitt taking on Syracuse, and a reminder, this game will take place in Yankee Stadium. I know, I think it is. I know, and if I recall last week, Northwestern and Iowa, that game was taking place in Wrigley Field, home of the Chicago Cubs. I read a line where Pitt was actually favored. Do I take it, or do I go with my gut that says never trust Pitt? You know what? I'm gonna trust Pitt this week because Syracuse, they have yet to win an ACC game this year. As crazy as it seems, they're still winless in ACC play. Then we have the Rutgers Scarlet Knights taking on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa ended up winning that low-scoring game, not by a score of 3-2, but by a score of 10-7. It was still a baseball score. Meanwhile, Rutgers, they hung in there from Ohio State. They actually led at halftime 9-7, but the Buckeyes proved to be too much for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. But anyway, Rutgers feel better about themselves this week than they did last week. They walked out of that game feeling a lot better about themselves. And I think in this game, I'm going to go with the upset. I think Rutgers could get it done over Iowa because I do not think Iowa is a great team. I think they're a great defense, but their offense is. I would rather watch a wall paint drying than watch the Iowa Hawkeyes offense. And speaking of Northwestern, speaking of the Hawkeyes, we have Northwestern taking on Wisconsin, the team that lost to Iowa last week, and a team that already lost to them as well. Come to think about it, it's going to be crazy that Iowa could be playing in the Big Ten championship game. Oh boy, that's not going to be a fun experience. But anyway, this game right here, I think this will be a get-right game for Wisconsin. They dropped a hard one over Indiana, and I do think Wisconsin will find a way to bounce back. Then we have Minnesota taking on Purdue. I don't know much about either one of these schools. I'm just going to pick Minnesota to win. And full disclosure, I actually remember now, it was Illinois got their huge road win over Minnesota. Just want to correct that. Then we have Oklahoma State taking on the UCF Scarlet Knights. And Oklahoma State had a huge win last week, the final win in Bedlam against Oklahoma, for at least for the foreseeable future. And come to think about it, remember when this school lost to South Alabama at home by like 3 touchdowns? Yep, that's a totally different team. And right now, they're in leading contention to playing maybe Texas in the Big 12 championship game. Meanwhile, UCF, they got their first Big 12 win over Cincinnati. But given that Oklahoma State is on a hot streak, I am going to take the Cowboys to win. Next we have is the Auburn Tigers taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks. And Arkansas, they saved their season against Florida. They just need 3 more wins. But it'll be all over if they lose to Auburn, who I can't recall what they done last. Wait, they beat Vanderbilt, and I did not do a prediction for it because we know what was going to happen. I'm gonna. This one's a toss-up, but I am gonna pick Arkansas to win because I trust KJ Jefferson more than I trust Peyton Thorne. Then we have the Wazoo Cougars taking on California Bears. And Washington State, they're trending towards the wrong direction. And California, are they the worst team in the Pac-12? No, they're probably the second worst team behind Arizona State. Another one of those toss-up games, but I do think this is a get-right game for Washington State. I got them bouncing back to get a win. Then we have the Stanford Cardinals taking on the Oregon State Beavers. Oregon State got a road win over Colorado. Stanford, I think they beat somebody. I can't recall who they beat. But anyway, this one's in Oregon State. I am taking the Beavers to win. Then we have Oklahoma, who lost 2 straight, taking on West Virginia. I think this one will be a get-right game for Oklahoma. So I'm going to roll with the Sooners to win at home. Then we have Cincinnati taking on Houston. Cincinnati is already out of bowl play. And Houston, they're trying. Actually got a win. They won last week against Baylor. So that's good. And I think they're going to feed off that momentum to get a win over a pretty rough Cincinnati team. And just to think about it, 2 years ago, Cincinnati was in the playoff. Now, maybe it's called from transitioning conferences. That's what happened, I guess. Then we have my second pick for game of the week that I ended up not choosing. and that is the Georgia Bulldogs hosting the Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss had a huge win over Texas A&M. Surprisingly high scoring game given that A&M usually has a good defense. In Georgia, it was a hard fought win over Missouri. This week and next week will show us what Georgia is made of. Because prior to last week, Georgia hasn't played anybody. No ranked opponents. And now they've taken on the second of what will look like being 3 straight ranked opponents. This one, I actually could see Ole Miss upsetting Georgia, but luckily Georgia is at home, so I'm going to roll with the Bulldogs to win. But if this game was in Ole Miss, there would have been a thought in my head where I'll take Ole Miss. Just saying, what if? Then we have the Florida Gators taking on the LSU Tigers. LSU coming off a tough loss against Alabama, and their quarterback Jayden Daniels, he didn't even finish the game. He had a concussion. And Florida's coming off a tough overtime home loss to Arkansas. Two schools that kind of need wins. I am going to take LSU to win because for now I'm going to take LSU to win. But if Jayden Daniels is not playing, I will probably flip my pick. Then we have Texas taking on TCU on the road. This is another game where I could see a possible upset because Texas, they had a big scare against Kansas State. They were up 27-7 at one point, but they end up coming off. But Kansas State, thanks to mistakes made by Texas quarterback, they were able to come all the way back to tie the game, and they eventually ended up tying it going to overtime where Texas were able to escape. But like I said last week, I might have said it last week, at this point in the season, it's not about how you win. It's about did you win? And did Texas win? Yes. I am going to take them on the road to beat TCU. Even though in this game, I won't be surprised if TCU pulls it off. Then we have Mississippi State taking on Texas A&M. Mississippi State coming off a home loss where they only scored 3 points against Kentucky. A&M, their defense had a rough day, giving up 38 points, but the offense had a good day, scoring 35. I guess that counts for something. I am going to take A&M because I think they're the more talented team, and they're better than what their record indicates. Then, if this was college basketball, this would have been my game of the week. I remember looking at the schedule. I wanted this to be my game of the week so bad, but because both these schools have fallen off a bit, I had to go in a different direction. It's the Duke Blue Devils taking on the North Carolina Tar Heels. Old-fashioned hate. If you don't know, I am a huge Duke hater. I do not like Duke at all. I do not like Duke at all. I don't like Duke. I don't like Duke. And I'm trying not to say the word hate, but they're the closest thing to it. And that goes for anything, not just college basketball. But I will give it to Duke last week. They did have a good home win over Wake Forest. In Carolina, they had a get-right game against Campbell. Anybody could beat Campbell. I think the environment's going to be hotly contested. It's going to be hype all game round. I don't know if Riley Leonard's playing. I'm hearing rumors that he might be out, and because he's going to be out, I am going to roll with the Tar Heels to win, to keep the victory bell. But given Carolina's history against backup QBs, I won't be surprised. I hate to say this, but I won't be surprised if Duke wins. Just saying. Then we have Iowa State taking on BYU. I am actually going to go with Iowa State to win on the road. Then we have another pick what I could have chose for game of the week if USC had a defense. And it's the Trojans taking on the Oregon Ducks. Trojans coming off a tough home loss against Washington. And Caleb Williams, it looked like he laid it all on the field. And with him crying on the field, crying to his mother, it made us look like he was playing his final game as a Trojan. But I think that'll occur next week against UCLA. Then we have the Oregon Ducks, who had a big win against Cal. Nothing's too spectacular about that. But luckily, this game isn't at home. I am taking Oregon to win. Not only because of their offense, they also have a good defense. And finally, my game of the week, the Michigan Wolverines traveling to Penn State, taking on the Nittany Lions. And the only reason I chose this as my game of the week over the top 10 battle between Ole Miss and Georgia and the other prospects, Washington, Utah, Oregon, USC, or even Duke, Carolina, because this is Michigan's first test. Like Georgia, they have not played any worthy opponents. Yes, they've been blowing them out. Last week was the most points they ever given up in an entire season, 13. But Michigan, this will be Michigan's first true test of the season. I think they'll also be tested again next week against Maryland before heading to Ohio State. But yeah, I think this one's going to be, we're going to see what Michigan's really capable of. Because Penn State, they put up a lot of points on the road against Maryland. Picking this game is tough. Honestly, I don't even know what to choose. I'm hearing a lot of distractions about Michigan and that whole Houston Astros like scandal of them stealing signals. Then you have Penn State, who will look good against Maryland but will look rough against Ohio State. Which Penn State team will show up? That's going to be the whole key. But I don't know. But I'm just going to trust Michigan to get it done on the road in Happy Valley. I'm going to go with them for the win. But I will not be surprised if Penn State wins. I will not be surprised at all. And on that note, that concludes the predictions. Tell me what y'all think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.